Welcome back everyone to the fourth episode of Python for Beginners tutorial series, and in this episode we'll be discussing variable types. Alright guys, so I already have my Jupyter notebook loaded up and I have already prepared this tutorial 2 folder for you guys. As I said, we'll be discussing variable types and its naming rules. So let us go on to the variable types. Alright, so when you create a variable, you reserve some space in the memory, and the amount of space reserved depends on the type of the data that we are storing in that variable. The data stored can be of many types, and Python has the following data types built in by default. They are numbers, strings, list, tuple, dictionary. And Python offers a built-in function type that helps you to check the data type of the value that is stored in the variable. So let us now go ahead and take some examples in order to understand these data types. First comes numbers. Number data type stores numeric values, and there are three different numeric value types: integer, float, complex numbers. Let us take one example of each and use type function to check their type. I'll go ahead and create some variables. Let us call x and assign it an integer, 10 in this case. Let us call y and store a float, let us say 5.5 in this case, and let us store a complex number in z, 2 plus 3j. Let us run the cell, and in the next cell let us use the type function to check their type. Let us go with the x first. I'll run the cell, and in the output you would see that the type for x is showing up to be integer. Let us use the same type function on y and run the cell, and you'd see it says float. That is what we passed in. On applying type function on z, we get complex. That means the data type that is stored in z is a complex number. Let us move on and look at list data types. I'm only giving examples of these data types. We'll go ahead and take a descriptive look on these data types in the future, and also we'll see different operations and methods that we can perform on them. We're just taking examples here. So let us see what lists are. So a list contains items separated by commas and enclosed within square brackets. Let us see what it is. Let me call a variable L and assign it some items, for example, apple, mango, one more, let us say banana. Alright, so here I have created a variable and stored a list in it. I'll run the cell, and I'll insert one more cell here and check the type of L. So I'll run it, and you'd see that the type function tells us that the value that is stored in L is of list data type. Let us move on to tuples. Now, tuples is another sequence data type that is similar to list. A tuple consists of number of values separated by commas. Unlike list, however, tuples are enclosed within parentheses. And also, the values in tuples later cannot be manipulated. Let us go ahead and take an example for this. Alright, so let us take a variable named t and assign it values within parentheses. Let me say ABC, X, Y, Z, comma, RPQ. Let us run the cell. Let us insert one more cell to check the type. Alright, so using type function, let us pass t into it and run the cell, and you'd see in the output we get tuple. So this is one of the example of tuple. Let us look at dictionaries, what dictionaries are. Alright, so a dictionary is a collection which is unordered, changeable and indexed, and they are written with curly braces and they have key value pairs. Let us take an example and see what it looks like. I can take a variable and call it D, and let me go ahead and use curly braces to store key value pairs. For example, let me store a name, and name could be let us say Anu. Okay, I can say ID and give it a number 4356, and I can say debt department maybe because this is the data that we are storing, and we can say sales. Alright, so this is a dictionary that we created right there, and let us run the cell. I'll go ahead and insert one more and say type D and run the cell, and you'd see that it says dict. Dict means it is of dictionary type. So we went ahead and took one examples of these major data types. Let us move on to the conventions or the naming rules that one should follow when naming a variable. A variable can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. Variable names can start with a letter or an underscore but cannot start with a number. So let us go ahead and see what that means. Let me insert a cell and say name equals to, let me say Aman. So here it says it can contain letters, numbers, and underscores. The variable name can start with a letter or an underscore. So we are starting this variable name with a letter. Let me use underscore and run the cell. There is no problem. But it says it cannot start with a number. Let me go ahead and put a number in front of it and run the cell. And you'd see that we got an error. Invalid decimal literal. So one thing that you have to keep in mind, that a variable name can start with an underscore but cannot start with a number. Second point says spaces are not allowed in a variable name. Let me just go ahead and just call it first name and run the cell. It is giving me invalid syntax. So I cannot have a space in between a variable's name. Instead, I can have a underscore to fill up the gap. For example, here it said student name instead of student name, where it had a gap or a space in between. Third point says you cannot use Python keywords as variable name. So let me go ahead and show you what Python keywords are. There are many keywords in Python, like false, it is a keyword, like true, true with a capital T, true, is, not, in, they cannot be keywords. Alright, so fourth point says variable name should be descriptive without being too long. Alright, so what that means, let us take the same example that is illustrated here. MC underscore wheels is better than just wheels, and the number of wheels on motorcycle. So let us say you want to store a data that you want to give the name as number of wheels on a motorcycle. So this name would become quite long. So instead of that, you can just say motorcycle underscore wheels, which makes the name not only short but also descriptive. Descriptive means that before wheels it says MC, so a user can understand that it points out to motorcycle. Let us move on to the fifth point. So the fifth point says be careful about using the lower letter L and the uppercase letter O in places where they can be confused with the numbers 1 and 0. That means when you write L lowercase, it seems more like 1. I'll go ahead and write 1. It seems more like 1. So someone can easily get confused between L and 1. So you should avoid using this lowercase L, and you should avoid using uppercase O, as it seems like 0. So one can easily get confused between 0 and O. So this is a small point that you should keep in mind for better writing the variable names. Alright, so let me go ahead and delete the cell. Alright, coming up next is name error. So this is one of the common error that you will come across while using variables, because you can simply just mess up the spelling of variables quite often. So this is the error that you might pop up with. Alright, let us go ahead and take an example and try to understand name error. So let us say we want a variable named message, and we want to store a string in it, and let us say it would be thank you for sharing Python with the world, Guido. If you don't know Guido, he was the one who created Python. And let us say you want to print this message and you messed up its spelling. Let us say we took one S from here and it is a spelling mistake. Let us run this, and you would see that a name error pops up. That means that says name message is not defined. So to fix that, what you would need to do here is just correct the spelling and run the cell. And it says thank you for sharing Python with the world, Guido. So this is it in variables.
Alright guys, so this is it for this video. I'll see you in the next. Thank you so much.